My agenda here has nothing to do with being correct or providing advice, but rather to suss out potential ways of considering various topics and situations. Not here to make friends or inspire enemy combatants, though also not opposed to either. Correct me, criticize me, words still won't hurt me. That said, the zombie apocalypse is happening if you acknowledge how many people can rationalize their way out of a paper bag. Any cures provided happen naturally, and I'm not liable. Carry on, shall we? Howdy, humans. Welcome to Potentially Provoking Discussions, and today I would like to discuss the idea of being treated like I'm just a Be-otch. I think it's important to clearly state at the onset that I'm not intending to take any sort of feminist point of view, but I'm not trying to not do that. I just don't really prefer to ascribe myself to a group and how they think I'm an individual. There's a lot of bad actors and bad apples who misrepresent things like that. And quite frankly, I personally can't find a coherent landing spot for what that would even be, truthfully, just speaking honestly from my own point of view. But at the same time, I do realize that a lot of what I'm about to say probably will seem like it is. Don't really care. People take their own they run with things wherever they want to. Left field, right field, doesn't matter to me. I'm gonna say what I want to say, so here it goes. I'm sure there's plenty I could say that I won't, since this is always off the cuff. We'll just see what happens. So, I would have to say that I do understand the gendering of the term Be-otch in its truest form, and a-hole tends to be attributed to males, Be-otch females. And I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to say overall, is that it's mostly that. And well, not necessarily blah blah blah, obviously lots of things. I'm just not even going to bother to explain any of that, but I think I've touched on it lightly enough to make my point known, and if you can't figure it out, then watch somebody else. Anyway, it's a real struggle at times to not be resentful of these truths, right? That even, just by voicing an opinion or saying something that somebody doesn't want to hear, you're a bad person, and so you're going to be called names. That's just common. I'm not gonna act as if I'm above it all and don't do the same thing, obviously, but I do my best to recognize when that's all that I'm doing, and do try to acknowledge when to not take even my own opinions in those veins very seriously. So, I might be like, oh, what an a-hole. I'm not going to be like, and now that person is doomed to my hatred for eternity. Wah, ha, 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 ha. I have all the power. It's like, but I feel like that's what happens a lot, and this is kind of what I'm trying to speak to, that I'm resistant to happening to me. So, I have found, and obviously, speaking honestly and candidly, it's usually men doing this to me, but not only. So I'm not going to act as if it is only a gender bias from other genders. And I'm not getting into a gender conversation on the whole. Like, the obvious truth to, like, diversity on that front is, like, not the point of my discussion. So, what I do have an issue with is being treated defensively, right? So I do something, the person is being defensive to me, and then they characterize me as a be-otch. And a be-otch is generally like someone who's obnoxiously overreacting or what have you, where like a-hole is a little bit more of like meanness, I suppose. Either way, I have found, and this is a theme throughout not only my entire life, but probably many of my videos previously and going forward, is there's this strong urge, desire, it happens either way, for people to internalize their external world into something that causes them to feel the need to defend themselves or to act out toward something that is challenging them. And that's where it comes from. Like, I consider myself a fairly even-tempered person. I'm pretty reasonable. I wouldn't say that most people don't feel that way about themselves, justly or unjustly. But I'm pretty confident. I've worked on this a lot, so I feel comfortable saying that and feeling that it's true. Because the times that this has happened to me, where someone has reacted to me like, oh, well, you're just a be-otch, it doesn't make sense. Like, purely offering a fact to someone because they're misspeaking. Well, I'm a snooty be-otch. Actually, I personally took it as I was trying to offer you information that you clearly do not have, and thought that would actually be useful to you, because I find information useful myself. But why bother considering any of that when you can just be offended that somebody corrected you because you're ignorant, and you're defensive about your ignorance, and so you're going to mistreat me and mischaracterize me as something undesirable simply because, in fact, you're the one who's undesirable. You know, if ignorant is undesirable in your world, you've interpreted my action as saying that about you. You don't like thinking of yourself that way, so then you react to me like I'm the one with a bad character or with a flaw, so that you don't have to face that about yourself. Yeah, I'm gonna say it. Fuck you. Like, I don't have sympathy for people who do that, and it's not rare. It is not rare that this happens, and it's not on me to own your flawed perspective and your defensiveness about your flaws. But yet, at the same time, because this is, I guess, ultimately my issue with this is not, I don't really care if people think I'm this, that, or the other. Not ultimately. You know, obviously, it's easier to do that with people you're not interacting with on a regular basis, like your coworkers or your family, because it will, you know, the persistence of that flavoring your future interactions with that person can be problematic, obviously. That is not preferred, but, like, in and of itself, I really don't care if somebody disagrees with me or dislikes my character. That's totally fine with me. The issue is more that then I have to deal with that person treating me a certain way because of their mischaracterization, and you know, and all that entails, or potentially even their gossip about how I'm this, that, or the other. Again, really, excuse me, I don't really care But when somebody else's flaws then ultimately color and alter how I have to interact with the world, it's fucking frustrating. That is a frustrating thing to deal with. And, all because somebody else isn't going to own up to their own BS. And then, when it becomes apparent that you've been characterized this way, you can't exactly then confront them for doing that to you and make it stop. It's not like, oh, well, do you realize you've mischaracterized me because of your own defensiveness? I'd really appreciate if you could get rid of that and then moving forward not carry that on into our future interactions. Certainly impossible to do that, because then it's going to be like doubly enforced. Damn frustrating. But, I'm certainly not the only person dealing with this. I'm not the only person who's been in, for example, because of wanting to avoid that characterization, flavoring, or coloring my interactions in the workplace, etc. I do have a workplace example of me avoiding being and doing something I would naturally want to do and be in order to preserve the lack of being characterized that way. Hope that made any sense. So, for example, I was at work. I had a direct colleague. We were teammates. I would characterize this person as having lackluster performance overall. It was a little frustrating for me. So this having happened really stood out to me as frustrating. But again, I was trying to avoid being characterized as a be-otch, so I did not react the way that I wanted to in the moment. Not to say that I resisted reacting the way I wanted to in the moment in other situations in the future in this environment. Because I tend to, but at that moment I just was so shocked that this happened. And it speaks to the constant need to find that balance and not being able to be who you really are in order to preserve your relationships. And it's very frustrating, which is a lot of my problem with this happening, or my disinterest in seeing this happen in my life overall. Because it's just, when you act out because you're being treated like one, I don't want to have to behave that way. Yet sometimes it's what's demanded, or you will be walked all over, or something worse. So anyway, sitting down with the colleague, my manager was talking to both of us. Excuse me. Whatever was being said, I said something at some point that by the end of the conversation, the manager, and this is just I guess this is a sexism thing in some way, thanked my colleague, who was a male, for having the idea. He said, "Oh, thank you for mentioning that. That was a good idea," or whatever he said. And it was something I said. It was something I said. And, kudos to the person who didn't say it, who was the male, and the person thanking that male for having said it was a male. Now, if I said, "Excuse me, no, I was the one who said that," or even if I bothered to point out that I was the one who said that, it probably would have seemed bitchy or like a problem when it really shouldn't have been. And I know that same manager at times, pardon, described me as like his wife. So these are the types of things that just, it's like, how do you even prevent it from happening? How do you overcome, and not to act like it's the end of the world or anything, but it's like, because I hold you accountable, now I'm a be-otch because your wife does that and you think she's a be-otch when she does it. It's just so exhausting to, you know, to even see it coming. It's like almost invisible in some ways. Like even someone who has that happen, you know, where somebody says, oh, you're acting like my wife. They might not even realize what that person's really saying. Like, oh, you're acting like my wife who I think is a bitch. You might not complete that thought on your own because you might not realize that's what's happening. And then you end up getting that characterization for nothing you actually did, but because of something someone else did that that person thinks looks the same. You know, I'm not trying to do this whole like hashtag me too or anything that anybody else does. I'm just saying, as clearly as I can muster in this moment, how irritating it is that it happens all the time. It happens to lots of people all the time. It's not just the be-otch thing with women or the a-hole thing with men. It's all kinds of things where people just refuse to acknowledge that they're characterizing other people because of previous of things that have happened to them that they don't even realize they're associating with what's happening in that moment. Blah, 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 blah. And it's just so frustrating, in my opinion, to be interacting with people who are so oblivious to their own behavior. So, yes, I'm using the example of being treated like a be-otch, like I'm just a be-otch because I bothered to mention things that people should know, or that I stand up for things that clearly are wrong to be happening, or whatever someone thinks is overreactive, but really is just trying to address things that are for the betterment of all people involved. Because that's when I feel like it happens the most. And it's all just people being discontented with themselves and envious or jealous of how you are, or I feel like I'm just going in the weeds here at this point. But I've even been treated like I'm some kind of a-hole because I don't eat mammals. Like, oh, well, you're the vegetarian. Which I'm not even a vegetarian, I'm a pescatarian. It makes no real difference to the people who do that. But, you know, it's like, why are you defensive to that? I didn't even, like, because I'm very much not a person, unless asked, that goes on and on about why I don't, you know, why my dietary choices are what they are. I really don't care to inform people because I don't want to be that person who's just that irritating preacher or whatever. And still it's like, oh, like I'm automatically characterized as someone who's something I've never actually demonstrated myself to be. And from an uninformed and clearly ignorant point of view, because you're characterizing me as something I have not done. I have not done the things that make you upset about that thing. And I'm very conscious of that, and yet I still am constantly having to just sigh and roll my eyes that I guess I can't do anything but be subjected to somebody's stereotypical BS judgments about me that are just unrelated to me. It's the American way, though I wouldn't say the American dream now, is it? But so I guess I'll end on saying, as much as people want to even characterize, like, even what I just said as feminism, or even feminists as being overreactionary and all this stuff, it is, like, just on the point that I'm trying to make in this video today. It is somewhat exhausting, and it is difficult, and some of us don't react very well to it. That's absolutely true. But, you know, to belittle somebody's experience of these frustrations as irrelevant and unworthy of mentioning because you're going to characterize that as being a difficult person or whatever is unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that happens. I get why people bristle against any allusion to it because of the baggage that comes with it, but to just dismiss it as if it's childish or something is ignorant. Okay, as usual, no idea how coherent that was or incoherent, but it's over now. And I suppose if you've had such an experience and you get what I'm saying and aren't going to just be a bitch about it, feel free to comment below. And if you think I'm just being a bitch, comment below. Believe me, I'll enjoy it. Otherwise, have a great day. Know that your experiences are your own. Do your best not to filter them as just like reason to be angry. And have a good life. Toodles.